Duh.
Hello, Sydney. I am K Swope, your ghost face with the most face, and we're getting to another Scream review, Scream 4, ladies and gentlemen. One I'm really excited to talk about. Here's how this video is going to work. We have a good section, we have a bad section. We're going to talk about both of them. We'll also have some notes for the end, things that were not necessarily good nor bad, just things worth bringing up. And then we are going to rate it on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the Citizen Kane of Scream movies, and 1 being stepping on a Lego brick. Yeah, that's the scale. So there you have it. Let's dive right in. Starting in the good section, I can safely say that the formula for Scream works maybe the best it ever has in 2011. Let me tell you why. Because in 2011, we were on the dawn of the digital age, and Ghostface just fits perfectly into that. Not to mention, we also just generally started getting so much more meta. As a result, with that, what happens then is it feels more culturally relevant than ever. And there are a few things in this film I would even go as far to say they predicted correctly as to how things would be. Like the idea of everyone streaming, being online all the time, that's a big idea behind this. That is very, very important, and I think that they hit the nail right on the head with that. Now, 2011, iPhones were still not everyone's cup of tea yet. They were still kind of integrating into society, and so many things that we know and love today were still in their infancy as far as technology and the digital metaverse, if you will, goes. And so I think that makes for a really, really great setting for this film and a great time for it as well. This film also leans into the meta elements quite well, and I complained back in Scream 3 that the meta stuff just didn't seem to land for me. This film definitely makes up for that. They have 2 false openings. The first opening we find out is actually the opening for Stab 6. Second false opening ends up being the opening to Stab 7, and then we get into the real opening of the film, and that was quite amusing. So I love that. Gotta give credit where credit is due, because again, with movies that have had so many, horror movies specifically, so many sequels at this point, that's the kind of thing you expect, and that's kind of enjoyable. I do quite enjoy seeing that. It's also time to talk about the main characters, because it has been 11 years since the last Scream movie came out at this point. Now, here's what you need to know. There's some good stuff going on here. Sydney has a book that she just published about her being a survivor of these events and that kind of thing. Apparently, she also at some point sued the film companies for using her story, and they are no longer allowed to make stab movies based off of the actual Woodsboro murders, aka the events of Screams 1, 2, and 3, which means that all of the stab movies in universe that have happened since then are all original stories. Meanwhile, Dewey and Gail, they got engaged at the end of Scream 3, and they're still married, and so that's nice to see. Both living in Woodsboro. Gail's having some struggles because she's kind of settled in. She does not have a big story to chase anymore, and she's kind of going a little stir-crazy because of that. Meanwhile, however, Dewey has been promoted to the sheriff of the Woodsboro Police Department, and so he's really moving up, and I enjoy seeing that. I also enjoy hearing that his ringtone is Axel F. Beverly Hills Cop theme. That is one of the greatest songs ever made. With every Scream movie, there are some rules that are established. Now, this film really takes the rules and kind of goes with a reboot kind of idea. So the idea is this. Now, what they didn't know is how prominent requels were going to be at this point. Now, in the next Scream movie, which we're going to not think about Scream 5 and 6 for majority of this review, especially for a lot of things that I'm saying, but in that movie, they directly talk about requels, but this is actually one of the first instances of a requel, to be quite honest. So they're talking about reboots when this in itself is actually being a requel, which is kind of crazy and kind of interesting to think about. But they talk about the new rules for that and the new rules in the more modern horror sphere. And I do think that they really hit the nail on the head, except for one thing that they do say, which we're going to come back around in the bad part. But either way, I think it's really, really good. Again, they talk about live streaming on the internet and how everybody's online, and how the Ghostface is most likely doing that as well, or at least planning on putting something online if they have not already. And of course, no one's surprised, they're dead right. But also in that element, I think they're so ahead of their time talking about that. As I kind of said before, the fact that they talk about the internet and the internet usage so much, I think is very, very important, because today we are living in that. And so I think it's great, and I think this film really holds up a lot because of how forward-thinking it was. But we're going to shift gears a little bit now. They do introduce a new cast of characters, but only really 3 of these characters matter all that much. First character is played by Emma Roberts. I think her name, if I'm not mistaken, is Jill Roberts, which is kind of ironic. They give her the same last name. But Jill is actually Sydney's cousin, and she's the one her and Sydney, I guess, kind of sort of being targeted by the Ghostface attacks, okay? It makes it really interesting because throughout the film, they're basically setting up that this cousin is going to be the next protagonist for upcoming films, because they were intending on making more Scream films to follow up this one. And they did, but not in the way that they wanted to, and they had a lot of snafus and things happened. So this was supposed to set up a new, I think, trilogy, if I'm not mistaken, and it didn't really end up doing that. Another important character we have is Kirby. Kirby is played by Hayden. I don't know how to say the last name. Her. She is actually the main protagonist, kind of sort of set up to be the new main protagonist. And I do think Kirby would be a great protagonist. Kirby's character was like the only character in this new character that I was like, oh yeah, that's a cool new character. I want to follow that character more. And the third character we need to talk about, I forget his name, is not important, but he is Roy Culkin, who is the brother of the other two Culkins, the Home Alone one and the guy that won an Oscar, okay? So he's the lesser known of the Culkin brothers, but he is still in this, and so it's still really fun to see him here. I bring him up because he is Ghostface, okay? Which is a twist that no one really saw coming, and no one really had a motive as to why, until we find out that the other Ghostface is Jill Roberts, Emma Roberts' character, Sydney's cousin. Now here's where things get a little crazy and definitely wild. So Jill, her whole life, every family event, they're always talking about Sydney this, Sydney that, because of all the stuff she went through with the Scream films. And Jill is attention starved. And so as a result, she decides, you know what? If I can, for one, kill Sydney, and two, become the new survivor of these things, then I will then be getting all the attention that Sydney used to get. Which is something that's kind of weird, but I've also, heard crazier things, I think, in this franchise, like wanting to be the next O.J. Simpson. Now, Roy Culkin's character comes in because he chose to be Ghostface, because with the rules of the requels, they're giving people what they want. They're elevating the original material, and they decide, you know what? Hey, I'm the Randy Meeks character, and she is the Sydney character. Therefore, if people really wanted Randy and Sydney to get together, which I'm not going to lie, I was sort of in that camp, then they would be very happy with this result, okay? And so she basically honeypotted him into doing this. And then, you know what she does? She betrays him and gives him the good old stabby in a scene very similar to the one in the first Scream film, except when Billy stabs Stu, it was more of an accident, and then they got kind of like mad at each other, versus Jill's stab was malicious from the start, okay? So that's important to bring up. Then, of course, she fakes everything, and she goes to the hospital assuming that Sydney is dead and gone, okay? Which is not the case because she survived. She was in the ICU. So she did not do a good job at tying up all of her loose ends, and that is when they're able to stop her in the hospital. And it's certainly crazy, but it made for a great twist because the movie sets everything up so well for you to not think that it's Jill because she's the victim, and they completely make a 180 about that. Now, the thing is, they do have to, in the sequels, elevate that, because this is a sequel, and you know how sequels work. And we'll talk about those in the sequels, because I'm reviewing all of these Scream films, building up to Scream 7 coming out here very, very shortly. We are, of course, on Scream 4. I did 1, 2, and 3 earlier, and of course, we're going to be doing 5 and 6 after this as well. Hopefully you guys are ready and excited, because I know that I sure am. Last thing I gotta say in the good categories, there is a police officer whose name is Perkins, okay? He's played by the Blackish guy, this dude. At some point, his police partner refers to him as Anthony by his first name, meaning his name is Anthony Perkins, which is the name of the actor from Psycho who played Norman Bates. So that was a fun little Easter egg that I caught, and I enjoyed seeing that. But we got to move on to the bad section now, ladies and gentlemen, and the first thing I gotta say is, if you're wondering why this video might look a little weird, okay, it's because I did my best to emulate what the design and color grading of the film looked like, and it looked very strange. It was kind of like orangish slightly. There was like a slight orange tint, it felt like, to everything, and there was a lot of lens flare, and everything seemed just a little on like the fuzzy blurry side, nothing too crazy, but just enough for you to be like, this looks a little weird. And now it does not take away from like the story in general, but it definitely is interesting, we'll put it like that. I also gotta say, something that I did not like is in the opening, okay, when they have all the Ghostface chase and stuff, they pay homage to how Tatum bit the dust in the first Scream film, and there's a girl who gets smashed by a garage door instead of kind of going up from one. And the problem with that scene is this. Just about every garage door I've ever seen has a sensor so that it cannot close on things as long as the sensors are put in place and stuff. And so you kind of have to assume the garage door sensors are not installed correctly in order for that to work, which I think is kind of stupid, not gonna lie. But that's more of a nitpick than anything. The big issue for this film happens with the new rules. I mentioned there was one earlier that just not great, and that is the gay rule. Now, so circa 2011, what they're saying is that in a horror film, the only way to really assume you're going to be safe is if you're gay. I don't know know where they got this from because I cannot think of a single example where that's true. And there are other YouTubers who have done videos on this who have said the exact same thing. So don't just take my word for it. There's a bunch out there. All I got to do is look it up. It does make for a funny moment where the one film geek guy is being hunted by Ghostface. He's knocked on the ground. And in order to try to save his life, he's like, I'm gay. And it doesn't work. And he's not gay. And so there you have it. But it doesn't make sense. Again, that joke was funny in the film. However, it just not doing it. I don't get it. I don't know why they had to even bring that up because it's just objectively not true. The biggest flaw of the film, in my opinion, is that. So we're done with the bad already. Let's go ahead and move into the notes. The first thing I have is that this film, definitely, they elevate the blood and gore compared to the previous Scream film. The other Scream films had a lot of blood, but they had like no gore at all. In this one, you literally see some intestines along with, you know, a corpse and blood, and yeah, you can picture that. And it's almost like, I don't mind blood and gore, to be quite honest. But the thing is, this franchise, up until this point, just didn't have a whole lot of gore. And so it's like, one of the things I could recommend to people who might be a little more squeamish would have been this franchise. And now I'm rewatching 4 and I'm realizing, this is actually kind of gory at points, and so I don't know that I could actually recommend that to my more squeamish friends now. So, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Again, it doesn't really take away or add to my personal enjoyment of the film. It's just an interesting thing to note. I would also like to say that almost nobody deserves to be shot in the gonads, okay? Because what happens is, I'll talk about the end of the film and stuff, they're going to pin it on Jill's ex-boyfriend doing the whole Scream Ghostface thing, right? They had it all set up. And before Jill shoots the boyfriend, because she was mad, you know, angry ex-girlfriend type stuff, and, you know, people can make their own opinions on that. I really don't care enough. Before she kills him, she shoots him in the balls. And I just saw that, I'm like, oh, that is, oh, no, why? If the dude did something wrong, like if the dude was a P. Diddy file, then by all means, and yes, you deserve that, but the guy did nothing wrong. It's so unjust. It's so cruel. Anyways, I've said enough here. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my review. Before I do, if you like this video and want to see more, like it. Subscribe button's always appreciated. Also, I'm not making this up. This is not clickbait. If you hit the like button on this video, it shows a little like screaming emoji. I don't know if it just detects that it's Scream. I don't know, but it's not clickbait. Literally, like it and unlike it if that's what you need to do, but just look at it. It's cool. I've seen that for the last couple ones I did. I don't know why that is, so check that out. Also, comment below, what's your favorite scary movie? That's something I'd love to hear from you guys. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and give this bad boy a rating. Now, I think this film is really good. It is easily one of my favorite in the franchise, if not my favorite, but that's the problem, because up until this point, the first Scream is fantastic, and the only one that I really have a hard time deciding if it's better than or not. And because I can't decide if it's better or not, I'm gonna give it the same rating I gave the first Scream and give it a good 8 out of 10. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my review of Scream 4. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I, of course, am K-Swope. Don't forget that just because this movie's scary does not mean that Jesus does not love you, because he does. And I will see you in the next one.